Hello and welcome to another edition of Florida Sportsman Action Spotter Podcast. I'm Captain Rick Riles. Hey, we're going to have a lot of fun. Here's what we're going to do this afternoon. We're going over to Paradise real quick. We're going to check in with Nosara Paradise Fishing and find out what the fishing has been like in Costa Rica this week. I don't know about you, but I'm a little less cold when I get a report from Paradise. Then we're going to come back to Florida and make a trip all the way around the state. We've got 11 of the preeminent fishermen in the state of Florida that have been fishing this week, and they're going to bring us what the news is from the water, what's going on with the fish, what the bait supply has been like, what kind of lures have been working, and what they're catching. Going to be a lot of fun, so sit back, get yourself a cool drink, and let's get rolling now. The Florida Sportsman Action Spotter Podcast is brought to you each and every week by Yamaha. Reliability starts here. By Tournament Master Chum, the best chum on earth. By Nosara Paradise Fishing, your dream vacation. And by Young Boats. You want the finest in flats, bay, and offshore hybrids? You need to check out youngboats.com. All right, let's get it rolling with a quick trip to Costa Rica. That's where we'll find Craig Sutton hanging out in Nosara.
I'm good, man. I'm real good.
Don't make me go back to North Florida. It's cold up there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I tell you what, it's summertime in Costa Rica, and it's just as on fire as it ever gets. Big marlin. We got a Dorado last week that he's over 40. I don't think he's over 45, but he's a nice fish. And there's some really nice marlin in those catches, plus real big yellowfin too, and then the small ones too. Plenty of good action.
Yeah, Craig, the small yellowfin over there, are they targets for fly rod guys? Are they visible enough to be able to see them and get a fly to them?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We host fly guys almost every week down there.
Really?
Oh, yeah. What they want to, drop that fly in front of a sailfish or a marlin or whatever they want to do. We're happy to oblige them for sure.
Now, when you're doing that, when you're doing the fly fishing, you're pulling just teasers and just waiting for one to come to the teaser? Yeah.
Yeah, just teasers and keeping a sharp eye on them and generally speaking, pull them a little bit faster than we normally would with the bait, just to cover more territory. And,
right.
When the fish comes up, we just pull those teasers up and drop that fly right in front of them, and away we go.
Ah, that's fantastic. So you've had guys do a lot of sailfish down there on the fly, huh?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, I was throwing a fly when I was 15.
Really?
That's what. Oh yeah. It got me hooked on the surface strike. That's why to this day you don't ever see me pull anything subsurface. Not swimming baits deep. I want to see that strike.
Yeah, that's so much of what we do. It truly is. And Craig, I got thrown out of a fly shop, and I've always felt bad after that. So maybe that sport's not for me. I don't know.
Why did they throw you out, Ricky?
They can't. Well, I went into John Botko's shop there, the Salty Feather, one time, and he said, "You been?" And I said, "Yeah, we did something we've been trying to accomplish for a long time." And he said, "What's that?" And I said, "We got a sail on the fly off of Stewart." Really? I said, "Yeah." He said, "Tell me about it." I said, "Well, we put our baits out, and by 8:30 we had 5. And I had my regular crew, and so we decided, because the owner of the Dos Amigos loved to fly fish, we decided that we just didn't need to catch any more. Let's just pull our dredges and watch what's happening. So that's a good plan, right? So we start pulling along, and sailfish comes up, and we laid that red streamer right in front of him, and he ate it like a champ, and it was just a fantastic fight. Big old 65, 70-pound fish, and he caught him on a 10 weight, and he just put on a great show, and it was wonderful. And old Botko's so fired up. He says, "Which fly do you use?" I said, "Well, that's that one you sold me here. It's like this one right over here." And I said, "You want to know why I use that one?" And he said, "No, yeah. Tell me why." And I said, "Because it fit right through the eyes of that cigar minnow that I put it through." He ran me out. You didn't catch no sailfish on the fly. Yes, I did.
Well, no, I know some guys, I'm not going to say names, but we've had guys that, were dropping bonita strips.
Yeah. Well, Craig, I'll tell you the honest to God's truth. We showed the fly to 2 fish. And I'll blame all this on Danny Young Jr. We showed the fly to 2 fish, and they could have cared less. They chewed on that dredge until we took it all the way out of the water, and then they were gone. So the third fish came up. Danny didn't say a word. He just stuck this dip net down in the live well, grabbed a cigar minute, and threw it at him. He said, "Here, eat this."
Well, and that, we have that all the time, especially with the marlin. Marlin doesn't want anything small. He wants something big.
Right.
We'll get them turning it down, and once in a while we'll get lucky on it. But our fish are aggressive. They're wanting a meal. They're not wanting a snack.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. I've seen. Now, do you guys do much lure fishing down there?
No.
Yeah.
We did a little bit in November. It was the yellowfin was so hot and heavy. We were trying to get a marlin out of the middle of the school, but and just the sailfish were ravenous. We were catching them up on an islander with nothing on it but a hook.
I'll be darned. And
it's just I kind of thought that the marlin were there. They just weren't having a chance to get to the bait. And every once in a while we'd see the porpoises frothing, showing us there's marlin in the spread, but we could never get their attention. And then, in the last 2 weeks, we've had some amazing run on marlin. And I mean, some nice fish.
Yeah. How big was that one I saw on Facebook yesterday?
That stripe, I don't know, 350-ish?
It looked like it. It was a big fish.
It's a big stripe. That's a nice size stripe. But, it's some good ones, that's for sure. Any marlin's a good one, though.
You got that right. I convinced my crew a long time ago. Any day we stick the tag in a billfish, we've had a good day. That's right. There's no doubt about it. And that goes all the way down to a blue one that we caught in the channel to Schooner Bay, pulling a Rapala that weighed about 25 pounds.
Oh, my God.
Tim,
really?
Yep. That's a blue marlin. Get the flag up. We did. We sure did.
That's exactly right. I don't blame you one bit.
They didn't let me fly 2 flags for the 700-pounder, so I get to fly a flag for the 27-pounder, don't I?
Well, at least you got the flag up, right?
Yeah, you got it. Craigie, we appreciate it so much. How are your bookings coming? Life getting back to normal?
We're picking up pace, a little better every day. And we did a couple packages today, and so can always be better. But trust me, I know it's been worse. So,
yes,
I'm
yes, it has.
For what it is.
Yes, it has, man. I see it now. August 14th, me landed on that airport. I'm ready, buddy. I'll see you soon, Craigie. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ricky. Have a good one.
Thank you, pal. That was Craig Sutton from Nosara Paradise Fishing. That means it's time to return to Florida. Let's head on up to the northeast corner and check in with Captain David Voorhees.
Hey, Captain Ricky, how you doing?
I'm doing wonderful, my boy. How about yourself?
A little chilly, but boy, I tell you, I wished I was down in Costa Rica with Craigie, boy. Oh man! But it's that time of year for us. We get a winter up here, and it's been okay. It's been good. This week's been tough. The things didn't line up the way I like them to. Mainly that low tide, that alkaline tide. We talked about this in the past. You got to this time of year, you really want that good tide to happen later in the day.
Right.
And now we're sort of on that early morning bite. It's and I just don't like the early morning in the wintertime. Now we caught some fish in the morning. Don't get me wrong, but it's just not as good as when you get that low tide. Let's say around 12, 1, 2, and 3 o'clock. That's sort of what I'm looking for. This week it didn't line up that way. We've had a lot of windy conditions up here. It's been windy. It's been cold. Water temperature's still down there. So it's tough fishing, but I've told several of my clients this week, it's only going to make a better fisherman out of you. We can all go out there and fish on the good days and catch fish. But if you really want to get good at it and learn stuff, you got to go out there when these days are tough, and it's going to make you really work hard. Now, I talked to Captain Vic Tyson this week and asked him about how the sheephead bite's been going. And, this is sheephead season. We're just getting into a good sheephead season. So the bite is good. However, everybody's having a hard time finding fiddler crabs.
Right.
And fiddler crabs is the bait of choice for sheephead. And nobody's got fiddler crabs. Rick, I bet you if we had a few buckets of fiddler crabs, we could probably make some good money on them because everybody's crying for them, from what I understand. Vic told me it's even possible you can actually order fiddler crabs online and get them shipped to your house.
Now, wait a minute. Now, do they come walking up your driveway, or how do they?
No, they come in a box. Rick, they come in a box. And he said it's the funniest thing. He said, when you open that box up, you better be over something that you're going to capture these crabs in, because they come out of this box. It's almost like somebody's pushing them out of the box when you open this box. But I got a kick out of that. But, he said that, fishing with the shrimp and the other stuff, what happens is, you got all these other fish that's going to, the sand perch are just relentless this year. The little silver sand perch, we call them. They're little drum fish, and they're absolutely everywhere. You got the sea bass. You got a bunch of stuff. You get out to the jetties, and you're just going to go through a lot of shrimp before you catch any decent sheephead. On a good day with shrimp, you might catch 4 or 5 sheephead. But if you had the fiddler crab, you'd tear them up. You'd be on fire right now. Black drum reports, anywhere along the South jetties, it sounds like they're catching black drum. The small, really small ones on up to the 6, 7, and even occasionally a good, nice 8-pounder. And from what I understand, you want to fish those, the bottom of the rocks, and they tend to like more of the shrimp, the cut bait and stuff like that. Mainly the cut shrimp. And the key with the black drum, black drum is totally different than a redfish. I tell people the redfish, I call him the one thumper. It's all you're going to feel with a redfish. You're going to boom, he's going to one thump. He's got that shrimp inhaled, and the hook's way down there, and you need to set the hook. The black drum is a nibbler.
Mm-hmm.
You almost got to wait till he finds the hook, and you're going to feel the pecking at it. You're going to feel them guys nibbling at your shrimp, and then finally, it's when you think, well, they pretty much got most of the shrimp. It's almost on that last nibble that you got to know when to set the hook. So they can be trickier to catch. They got a smaller mouth. A lot of guys will go with a smaller hook. But from what I understand, the black drum and the sheephead have been on fire. Now, back in the creeks, the red fishing is still good, even though we don't have the good tides. But that's going to be changing this weekend coming up. So we're going to have these later. The tides are going to be getting later, and later. So next week, we look like we're lining up for some really good late evening low tides. So I predict that there's going to be some good redfish back in the creeks. Trout fishing, it's hit or miss with the trout. You just have to find them. And when you find them, you almost have to get them just fired up, get them going. And I found sometimes it's better when I'm fishing with 3 guys that really know how to catch them, and they can get those fish going, and we tend to catch a few. But picked up a few flounder this week, Rick, some stragglers back in the creek in those deep holes. I think there's still a lot of flounders that just hang back. They don't all go offshore, and there's been some nice keepers, 15, 16 inchers. So it's been a mixed bag, but hey, it's still worth going out there and wetting a line.
Oh, it's always worth it, David. But to summarize, and this is the point that I want the guys to understand, if you've got a low tide, an incoming tide late in the afternoon or late in the evening, we've gone through that warm midday stretch where that sun's been pounding down on that warm mud or on that mud. And then when the water comes back in, it's like coming over a water heater. It warms it. And I think you'd agree with me, that's what makes your evenings so much more valuable in the wintertime than your early mornings. Is that the way you see it?
Absolutely, Rick.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can see that temperature sometimes rise. You can watch your temperature gauge on your depth recorder, and you'll see that thing rise sometimes 3 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And that's quite a warming trend, for these fish. But you're absolutely right. And the key thing to up here in Northeast Florida that you don't see down in South Florida is a lot of our flats are covered in like a black mud. It's almost, it's just black mud. And that black really absorbs the heat as opposed to white sand or white coral or lime rock. That black mud it really soaks up the heat.
Yep, long as you don't fall in it, it's the best kind of bottom you can have in the wintertime. David, that's a great report. We always appreciate it so much. Please tell me we can talk with you next week.
Absolutely, Rick. And I guess the offshore guys, I know it's been windy. I guess they just haven't been able to get out, or have you heard anything on the offshore?
David, thank you for reminding me. I'm getting old and senile. The offshore fishing, the bottom fishing is okay, but the current has picked up and has gotten really strong out near the break. It's been very difficult for the guys trying to catch muttons and mangrove snapper, and even vermilion snappers and triggerfish. The tuna fishing is fair. It's not great. Mark Lacavera had a couple of sails on, I believe it was Wednesday, fishing a rough day, and they did pretty well on the tuna on that day too. So it's worth it to get to the ledge right now, but don't count on the bottom fishing because the current is almost running too strong for your sinker to hit the bottom.
Well, that's great. That's good to know, Rick.
All right, buddy. Listen, I appreciate you so much, and we'll talk with you next week if that's okay.
Absolutely. Tight lines, everybody.
Thank you, David. All right, thanks to Captain David Borges for a great Northeast Florida report. Now let's move down to the East Central and check in with our buddy Jim Ross. Jim, how are you?
I'm doing great this week.
Good. You sound like your back feels better.
It does feel better. I actually was at the chiropractor's today, and they were doing a review of my x-rays, and things are getting lined up better and better each time. So the hard work that I've put in is coming to fruition.
Good deal. Jimmy, you'll never believe what my orthopedist told me about my back last week.
What's that?
I went to see him, and he said, your disc looked like you've been running a small boat on a big ocean for 50 years. Well, there may be a reason it looks that way.
Yes, there's a possibility that you might be pretty close with that diagnosis, Doc.
That's exactly right. How's the fishing in East Central Florida?
You know, it's getting better. We had this
Really?
warming spell at the end of the week, and despite a little bit of turbulence over the weekend, it's still pretty good. And this whole week should be a good week. I'm really looking forward to it because we have lows that are supposed to be in the mid to upper 40s to low 50s, and then we have highs that are right around that 68 to 70 degree range. And usually, hold on a second, my ducks are talking to me. Well, they had something to say for a second. I guess they didn't have a whole lot to say. They just wanted to make a little mention there. We got these black belly whiskers that come flying into our pond, and they make the most unique sound. But anyway, going back to those temperatures, so highs around 68 to 70, lows right around that 50, 52, upper 40s, 50 to 52 range. What that does, it concentrates the fish back into those little pockets and little holes.
Mm-hmm.
Last week, the water got so warm that the fish they scatter all over the place. It's kind of like taking a handful of marbles and just rolling it down a basketball court.
Sure.
You don't know where they're going. Okay? So now we get a little bit of cooling, but not severe cooling. And what that's going to do is it's going to make those fish want to group back up again. And they're going to stage right on the edges of holes, depressions, leeward edges, leeward shorelines. So it's going to make it a lot easier to find the fish. And when you do find them, there's not just going to be one or two. There should be, 12, 15, 20 maybe. There won't be 50 or 60 most likely, but there should be bigger groups of fish this week based on what the weather forecast looks like.
Oh, that's outstanding. Now, you say they gather in the deeper holes. Is that a temperature thing? Does that keep them warmer?
Well, I should clarify that, okay? Deeper holes in the Mosquito Lagoon mean 2 to 3 feet.
Right. Right.
Instead of 12 inches. But what they'll do is in those depressions and holes that are in the flats and along the edges of the channels. They'll slide off of them at night, and as soon as the sun pops out, they'll get right back up on top. So they won't go, they shouldn't anyway, go running all the way back, all the way into the east side, way back behind the clinkers, down behind Pelican Island. You know, they shouldn't be scattered all over the place,
right,
trying to get as shallow as they possibly can. They should just stay real close to those edges based on this fairly stable water temperature and air temperature that we're going to have. And so we're really, really looking forward to that. The other thing is, anytime that we get a north wind, especially in the Ponce Inlet, Oak Hill, Edgewater area, that water up there cleans up considerably. If we get a south wind, it dirties up because the south end of Mosquito Lagoon is dirtier than the north end right now. So that north wind is going to clean that water up from, Three Sisters, down through Orange Island, down into Slippery Creek, and even maybe down to Hong Kong Flats and the Shotgun. And if it gets that far down, guys and gals are going to have an incredible week of sight casting in and around those islands. Now, when you go over to the Indian River side, we don't have those little islands and little hideaway, tuckaway places. So what you're going to look for there is you're going to look for places where the shorelines jut out to the east or to the west, depending on the shoreline that you happen to be on. That gives a little bit of a break from that northerly component to that wind. And if there's any kind of deeper water next to it, a causeway is a perfect example of that. You're going to find fish holding in those areas because the little bit deeper water they can slide into at night, they can slide up on the edge in the shallower water when the sun's out in the daytime. Should be just really, really good conditions for this whole week. And then down at Sebastian, it may bring, possibly bring the flounder back in. We had a short spurt of flounder here up this last cold front, but as soon as it got warm, they dispersed again, and nobody started catching them. Nobody was catching them. So it may put them in the inlet and hold them in the inlet, and that's kind of what we're thinking for that south end of my region. And
they get some really big ones in that inlet too, don't they?
8 pound is not uncommon. Whew, 10 and 12 is a possibility just about every day.
That's a really good
time
one.
Of the year.
Now, when you're talking fish on the flats that are getting in the holes, you're talking primarily trout and reds, right?
Trout, reds, black drum, and even the flounder at times when you're in the northern part of the section. Oak Hill and Edgewater gets a lot of flounder this time of the year up on the flats. And don't be surprised. This will absolutely freak you out. But don't be surprised if you don't see a gag grouper or two be caught in the next couple of weeks if these conditions remain like they are right now. Because the gags will actually get up on the flats.
I got to tell you, I'm very thankful to report that Captain Robert Johnson, fishing in a creek in St. Augustine, caught 7 undersized gags in the same spot the other day. We have been sorely lacking for inshore little bitty gags, and we're convinced that's why we're not getting big gags offshore. And I, for one, am mighty glad to see those little shorts start showing up again.
Yeah.
That's great news indeed. All right, real quick, have you heard anything from the offshore at all? Has it been pretty well closed?
It's been a little bumpy. The shark guys that are getting out there on the night trips out in front of the pier have been catching a few sharp nose and a few fine tooth. The black tips seem to have left. The water temperature dropped a little bit for them. In and around the tip of the Cape, inside of Port Canaveral, we're also getting a few sheephead, a few pompano, and a few bluefish and Spanish mackerel. But I haven't really gotten much in the way of an offshore report other than the kingfish holding on the 70 to 90-foot reefs. And that's pretty standard throughout the region. But outside of that, not a whole lot going on right now. At least nobody's really been out there to test the waters. Gotcha. Bingo.
Jimmy, thank you so much. We appreciate it. I hope we can talk with you next week.
I look forward to it, Rick.
Me too, buddy. Captain Jim Ross from Fine Line Fishing Charters. All right, now we're going to head on down a little bit further south and find out what's going on with the sailfish by checking in with our buddy, Captain John Earhart.
Yes, sir. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you, buddy. Tell me a fish story.
Well, right now, if we can get offshore, I would definitely expect some good sailfish in the next couple of days. We've been catching some mahi, a few nice blackfin tuna, a lot of bonita. I mean, you got to work through these bonita to get the sailfish, but I certainly don't mind having some steady action in between good sailfish bites. And we've even had some kingfish in the mix as well. You know, most of that action's been 90 to about 150 feet of water, just looking for some kind of color change, temperature change, maybe even a slight weed line. And trolling dead ballyhoo has been pretty effective, and you can cover a lot of ground that way until you can hone in on an area that's holding fish. And typically when I start getting bites, I'll do 5 or 6 passes in that same general area, making big circles, to see if I can capitalize on the fish that are in that area. Because sometimes I'll troll up that sailfish 2 or 3 times before he actually decides to eat one of my circle hook ballyhoos that I'm trolling behind the spread.
I see. Now let me ask you, on your circle hook rigs, are you an O-rig guy, or are you doing the Costa Rican cross over the top of the ballyhoo's head?
I'm more of an O-ring guy. I call that the biscuit rig. I use copper wire and a little rubber O-ring that just slides right over the circle hook.
Right. Yeah, so am I. I'm the same way, but a lot of guys still like that old X on the head Costa Rican method, and they've been very successful.
They're both very effective.
Yep, they sure are. And I tell you what, John, I think they're also very effective with blackfin tuna. I catch a better ratio of my tuna bites on those than I do on a J hook.
Yeah.
Now, what are you hearing?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just saying, when you do hook one with a circle hook, it seems like you're a lot more likely to catch it. Like sometimes those J hooks, for some reason, they wind up falling out of the fish's mouth somehow. I don't know how that's possible, but it does happen a lot.
Yeah, but it doesn't happen very often with the circle hook. You're right. What are you hearing from inshore in your area?
Inshore, we got a lot of sheep's head right now. Some pompano have showed up. The snook bite's still been pretty steady, believe it or not, even with this colder water. And we've got a lot of jack crevalles, some black drum, even a few triple tail. So it's been good action all around, both using bait fish, shrimp, and the goofy jigs for pompano. So far, has your pompano run been pretty strong? I'd say it's been fair overall. It hasn't been spectacular, but it hasn't been terrible either. So I'd just say it's been average. I would expect it to get a lot better this month and next month. January and February is usually our peak season for going out there and catching limits of pompano in the river. I would guess most of your guys are not bottom fishing this time of year. Pretty much everybody's chasing sailfish, right? Yeah, mostly sailfish. I mean, they are catching a lot of vermilion snapper offshore, big lane snappers, even nice muttons, but predominantly most of my clientele want to chase the sailfish this time of year. Gotcha. I understand. Well, that's a great report, John. We appreciate it so much. I'll be following the Pelican results online like I always do, and I'm looking forward to hear how the week went. We'll talk with you in a week if that's okay. Yes, sir. I'll talk to you next week. Thank you, Captain John. Captain John Earhart from the Chaos and the Mayhem said this is the time of year in Stewart to fish. This is the time of year in Stewart to fish for sailfish. They and the mahi are taking center stage right now. So let's find out what's going on further south down in Captain Alan Sherman's range.
I'm great, Rick. Happy New Year. It's a new year, right?
It is a new year, and it's going to be a great one. I just feel it in my bones.
Well, I know the weather here for us is as good as it's been for a while, so it's definitely ushered in some nice weather for us, and we're looking forward to some outstanding fishing for the upcoming week.
See, there you go. That's outstanding in itself. Tell me what's been going on down there.
So last week we had a lot of wind, northeast winds, 15 to 30, and sustained for 3-4 days in a row. So that made our fishing pretty difficult. And then before that, we had some cold weather as well, and it chilled the inshore waters into the 60s, and that's not good for us. So the inshore fishing in Miami turned off, and the offshore fishing was difficult because of the big seas out there. But now things have changed. The waters have warmed up in the inshore, and the waters have calmed down on the offshore. So let's start on the offshore side. There's been some good pushes of Spanish mackerel moving along the beaches, anywhere from off the fishing piers to 30, 40 feet of water. And there are schools, nice-sized schools, and they're settling for a little while, and then they're moving further south. So you got to go out there looking for them, trolling some hard plastic lures or some spoons or feathers, looking for birds, looking for bait fish, and then concentrating your efforts in those areas. Mixed in with the mackerel or some bluefish, jack crevalles and blue runners. So you get into a school of them, and it can be, a lot of fun. A little further offshore, the sail fishing. I just got a report from Jimbo Thomas today, and he told me that there was quite a few sailfish being caught today. So looks like we've got some sailfish schools moving into our area. And with the good conditions that we have, a hard north current, winds are out of the west-northwest, and probably going to stay like that for the next few days. It'll build up a little swell offshore, but the sailfish like that. They like to ride those swells as they're heading southbound. So should be some good sail fishing out there, anywhere from just outside the outer reef, 80 feet of water, on out to, say, 300 feet of water. And I always like to concentrate my efforts around artificial wrecks. And one of the reasons for that is the wrecks hold a lot of bait fish schools. The sailfish know it, and they sense where the schools are, and they just, zoom right in on them. So hit those areas, in those depths of water, and there's a really good chance that you can get multiple hookups on sailfish this week.
Now, Alan,
otherwise,
Alan,
yes.
I don't mean to interrupt you. It's been kind of my experience. Sail fishing is my passion. I love it with all my heart. I love your theory on artificial wrecks, and I agree with it 100%. But I don't do well when I pull right over the top of the wreck. It seems like the varmints all come and get my baits, the cudas and the mackerel and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. I think if I could stay 150 yards off of each wreck and work its circumference over each one of the wrecks, that would be a better approach for sailfish. Do you agree with that, or do you like to fish the center of the wreck?
I totally agree with you, and the way the guys fish the wrecks for sailfish is they're not going to plant themselves on top of one. They're going to get in the area and wait for the fish to come to them. They're going to power fish, but they're not going to be fishing right on top of an artificial wreck. Mm-hmm. They may cover it for a few moments, but they're going to work themselves off of it as they wait for those bites. If they're looking for, if they're deploying other baits, deeper in the water column, some on the bottom, some halfway down, looking for a cobia, looking for groupers or amberjacks, then they're going to stick closer to the wrecks and wait for the sailfish to find them. But if they're just really looking for the sailfish, they're going to get themselves in the area. And down here in South Florida, we have hundreds of artificial wrecks. And they have areas where there are multiple wrecks very close to one another. So, all you need to do is get in the area, and the chances are really good that the sailfish are going to come to you.
Great
because
tip.
These fish are traveling. They're not single fish right now. They're pods. They're groups. Mm-hmm. And when you get one, you get more than one. So, all you got to do is be in the area. They're going to sense those live baits if you're fishing them on a kite or a free line. They're going to feel those vibrations, and they're going to move right in on your baits, regardless of how close to the artificial reef you are, for sure.
I would also encourage the guys to resist the temptation, and I did this for so many years until Captain Glenn Cameron taught me better. Resist the temptation when you get one on to clear all your other lines, because he's not by himself, and you need to focus. Every now and then you're probably going to get tangled and have to cut a line or something. That's okay. Right. That's okay. But you keep your eyes on those other baits while that fish is off and jumping, because there's more around than just him.
Good point. Very good point. With the other fishing going on, the kingfishing, there's kingfish out there. We don't have lots of them in the area right now. We've had some large cirro mackerel, blackfin tunas. All the other fish are scattered out, and I don't want to say they're incidental catches, but they're just not biting all the time. So while you're looking for sailfish, you also have a shot at a dolphin, a kingfish, a cirro mackerel, a blackfin tuna. So there's other fish in the area. There's just not lots of them. No big schools of kingfish, no big schools of cirro mackerel or blackfin tunas at the moment. Grouper season is over now, the shallow water groupers. So the guys are catching some amberjacks on the wrecks. There's quite a few mutton snappers, but the currents are pretty strong right now. We've had a hard north current, and sometimes it'll get those fish feeding, but it also makes it a lot more difficult to target them. There was a really good bite of swordfish offshore, but that, the rough conditions kind of messed that up. Mm-hmm. But once the conditions out there calm down a little bit, the daytime sword fishing should get back to the way it was more than a week ago.
Gotcha.
Other than that, let's see, the bone fishing on the flats of South Biscayne Bay, excellent.
Oh, good.
In the cooler water, the fish, even though they adapted to it, and big schools have moved up into the flats. I know one of my buddies, Mo Estevez, his clients have been whacking them. So that's a pretty good bite if you got a shallow water skiff. And then I've been in Flamingo, and the fishing in Flamingo is not great, but it's good. We fished out on the coast, and we had snook and redfish. Big schools of glass minnows out there, and these fish are feeding heavily on them. Tough bait, though. If you're trying to imitate a glass minnow, there's not a lot of lures that are like a quarter of an inch long that can do that. But one of the redfish I filleted, his gut was so full of glass minnows. I'm not really sure how he thought he was going to fit that large shrimp in his mouth and into his stomach, but he did.
Yeah.
And it's the one that got him. But there's fish out there too. So that's pretty much what we have going on. Rick, I got to mention something. On my way to Flamingo on Friday, I listened to one of our podcasts, one of the most recent ones that you talked to Ray Rocher about the wahoo fishing, and the dolphin fishing. And I got to tell you, that was an incredible interview. And I definitely urge the listeners to go on Florida Sportsman's webpage and hook up to the podcast and listen to your interview. You guys were just phenomenal. Answered so many questions. It was great. Thank
you so much. Ray is one of the smartest people I know, probably the nicest person I know, and just
agree.
So knowledgeable. I hate to see him. It's time. I mean, they have terms just like politicians do, and it's time for him to rotate off of that, off of his chairmanship of that committee. But I hate it because his knowledge is invaluable, and do I wish the commission would listen.
Well, hopefully they will. He came up with a lot of great information. And, I was worried for a minute that you guys weren't going to touch on the commercial fishing being done away from the United States.
Right.
In the Caribbean, around the Dominican Republic and Mexico, because, for a long time, a lot of us have felt that we're not getting a lot of the bigger fish because they are. And it's very possible that could be the case.
That very well could be. Alan, it's a great report, and thank you so much for your kind words about my interview with Ray. I appreciate it very much. Please tell me we can talk with you next week.
Most definitely, Rick. I look forward to it. Happy New Year.
All right, Take care. A minute. Bye-bye. Make sure I've got this right, okay? Get 'em Sport Fishing Adventures, right?
Charters.
Get 'em Sport Fishing Charters.
It's an adventure.
It is an adventure to go fishing on Get 'em Sport Fishing Charters. That's what I meant. Thank you, Alan. I appreciate it.
Talk to you soon.
Take care, buddy.
All right.
Our thanks to Captain Alan Sherman from Get 'em Sport Fishing Charters for a great report. Now, let's swing over to the southwest area at 10,000 Islands to be exact and check in with the mayor of 10,000 Islands, Captain Steve Dahl. Steve, how are you?
Hey, how are you?
I'm fine. How about yourself?
I'm doing great.
Good.
Things have been good.
Good. Happy New Year.
Likewise, you too.
Yes, sir.
It's going to be hopefully a better one.
It's going to be a great one. It's going to be a great one. We won't even remember 2020.
Well, let's hope.
Yep, I'm all for that. All right, let's talk about fishing. What's going on in 10,000 Islands?
Quite a bit. Our offshore bite has picked up pretty good, which is good to hear. It was we had some rougher weather, so we weren't getting out as far, and some of the bigger boats weren't, kind of staying a little bit closer to shore. So we had a little bit of break in the action with the wind, and it's that time of the year. It's from now to March. We're going to get those kind of weekly cold fronts, I call them. Probably not as cold as it is up by you today, I would imagine. But,
yeah. It's pretty chilly up here. We're seeing low 40s, high 30s at night, and some days we get to the 60s, and some days we don't get that high.
Yeah, that's we don't get it that bad, but it's still chilly, all relative. But what it has done is cool down the water quite a bit. Our water temps are kind of in the upper 60s now that it's kind of stabilized, and it's kind of excited the bite a little bit, especially on the offshore side. We're seeing really good catches of red grouper, some football mangrove snapper. I mean, just big mangroves, and that's been kind of the deal from October on. We've just seen this rush, from near shore to offshore bigger mangrove snapper, which is great. And then we're starting to see a bunch of yellowtails again too. We had a period where we were starting to see some juveniles on the nearshore wrecks and reefs, but the offshore guys were catching them, and then they kind of disappeared, and all of a sudden they're starting to come back. And between those and keeper lane snapper, and the snapper bite's been really good. And some of those bigger mangroves are, you can catch them on jigs, you can catch them. You don't necessarily need the bottom fish for them. A lot of guys don't like to just, vertical fish with those, but if you like something a little bit more interactive, you can certainly jig those up with, metal jigs and some of that lighter, like slow pitch jigging that's, become so popular. That's a lot of fun. So, if you hook up with, a bigger grouper or, an AJ or something to that avail, you're really going to, have some fun pulling in a big fish on a little bit lighter gear than your normal conventional bottom fish and stuff. So offshore bite's pretty good. And it's we got a wide range of depths it's kind of doing right now. It really starts heating up from that about 40-mile mark and probably out to about 65 miles. I mean, you can go further, but you kind of run that risk of that wind kicking up and kind of swirling on you. Sometimes when you're that far from shore, the wind can be coming from a different direction than when you are onshore. So you've got to be a little bit savvy about how to, gauge that and with your different feather wraps and buoy weather and all that fun stuff. So heed a little caution if you're going out there because the winds can certainly kick up. So offshore bite's been doing really good.
Steve, what's your favorite? Yeah. What's your favorite weather forecasting tool like that? Wind finder or buoy weather, or what do you use?
I love buoy. If I could see, it's kind of like what's the, it's our old saying, Rick, about, what's the best boat? If you could take all the components of 5 different boats, you can make the perfect boat. I kind of liken that to the weather app.
Right.
I like a lot of them. I like My Radar Pro is a real good one for me. I really like that one just because we have, in our region, we got, thunderstorms can fire up pretty regularly over the Everglades and kind of push down into us. So I can kind of see that stuff coming, and it kind of gives you wind direction to kind of gauge what direction those storms are actually going to go. And it also gives you animated wind velocities as well. So My Radar Pro I really like. I like windy. I like buoy weather is really good. And, just as a snapshot, I'm not a big Weather Channel fan, but if I need it, just a quick pinch to kind of predict, 7 days out or, kind of get an idea what the week's like, I'll kind of look at that as well. So there's goods and bads, between all of them, but regularly I'm checking My Radar Pro. That's kind of been my go-to. Yeah,
my go-tos are Windfinder and FishWeather.com.
I haven't checked out fish weather. You're probably the third or fourth captain that's told me that's got to be in my arsenal. So I think I got to download that one.
Yeah, but, I know one thing. I know that the weather forecasters in general are a whole lot better than they used to be, and we.
Oh, they are. Yeah.
As much as we complain about them, I haven't been stuck by a 20-knot northwesterly wind that came up out of nowhere in a long, long time.
No, you're right about that, and it's it's easier to interpret too. The technology's gotten so good on some of these apps where a little common sense. You don't have to be a meteorologist by any stretch of the imagination to kind of use some common sense of and they got a lot of future forecasts as well that you can kind of play with, and as far as with different times of day. It's pretty neat. It bodes well for the future because. Like every year, there's a new, bigger and better coming out. So,
yep,
pretty good.
Yep, that's outstanding. I agree with you 100%. Well, your redfish still biting?
Yeah, the reds are biting, and amazingly, the snook have been on a little bit of a comeback despite the cooler water temperatures. Not sure what to make of it. A little bit of hints of red tide. I'll just caution some folks, but it's nowhere near what we had back in 2018. So, but the snook fishing, I don't know why, but just this week alone, I don't know if it's just the extra boats that have been out, but I've heard three snook over 40 inches this past week, and only one was out of a capital boat. Two were recreational anglers, so that's fantastic to hear. This time of year, that's kind of rare to get one's that big, let alone three in a week. And who knows? Maybe there's more, but it's been a good week. Peppering in the trout fishing, which is it's just on fire and will continue to be on fire. Once that water is in that 60-degree range, they bunch up really good on us. And, not out of the question to go catch 25, 50 trout, in pretty short order. So if you find them, you're going to catch a pile of them. So, and the mix is the sugar trout too. Not a lot of, folks know about sugar trout, but, they're basically a smaller version of a speckled sea trout without the spots. And, those eat just as good. So keep that in mind, but they're just, definitely on the smaller side. But those are in the mix too. And, so really the big three on the inshore side are still holding steady, and they're bunched up with a little bit cooler water. So if you find them, you're going to, don't give up on the spots, because if you catch one, there's a really good chance you're going to catch multiples out of that spot. So I'm generally a run and gun fisherman, and don't, try to cover as much water as possible. But when that water temperature gets in the 60s down in the 10,000 islands, if you've got, 2 to 3, 4 spots, that you can kind of camp on throughout a day, you're going to do pretty good, because they're not moving very far, but they'll eat. You just got to give them a little bit of time.
Those little sugar trout will always have a great place in my heart. First off, they're a great tarpon bait. Tarpon love them.
Yeah, they do.
Second off, I spent my bachelor party, my best man and I, standing on what is now my dock. It was back then, it was my stepdaddy's dock, but standing on his dock, catching 132 sugar trout. And we spent the morning of my wedding frantically driving around Mayport trying to find some place that would buy our trout on a Sunday morning so I could go to my wedding.
That's hilarious. I love that.
I wish I hadn't coughed my way through that. That's 100% true. Yep. I still remember driving around trying to find a fish market where somebody was there working. Please pay me later, but please take the trout out of the back of my truck. I'm getting married this afternoon.
That's a great story. I love it.
True story. Thanks, Captain Steve. We'll talk with you next week if that's okay.
Hey, yeah, looking forward to it. Absolutely.
Thank you, brother. Take care. Steve Dahl from 10,000 Island area. And let me tell you something. That's a better place to be than Northeast Florida this time of year. Our thanks to Captain Steve Dahl, and I hope that little bit of red tide he's dealing with down there goes away quickly. Sounds like it will as this water chills down. Now, let's pull over into the southwest area and talk with Captain Greg Stamper. Greg, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Rick. How are you?
Great. Happy New Year, my brother. Tell me about fishing in Southwest Florida.
Well, Happy New Year to you and everybody out there. Southwest Florida's been pretty damn good, to be honest with you, this week, Rick. We've had a really good bite, but yesterday in the back bays, things slowed down a bit on these super low winter tides.
Okay. All right. Now, you're getting a super low tide this time of year because of an east wind or because of a moon phase?
No, typically this time of year, the lowest tides happen from now until about early March. We get these super low tides that are about a foot below what normal zero is. And now if you add wind to that equation, that really, really pushes water out to the point where even some of the channels that we run around in our neck of the woods are almost too shallow for boats that are over 25, 30 feet to get through. So you have to be aware of what's going on. And these fish that we are catching in the back bays right now are definitely all piled up in the areas where it's deep. And some of those areas, Rick, are right next to channels. So if you see a couple guides hanging out, there's probably a reason for that.
I see. All right. So the fish are shallow, but close to areas of deep water where they can get to safety. Is that right?
That's absolutely right.
Okay.
We had a really good bite this week for pompano. The trout bite was very, very good. We had a situation or two where we did still catch that red tide. You could smell it. We're still getting some fish that are moving in that are very, very decomposed, that have been out there for a while. Unfortunately, I hate to say it, but today I did see a few nice sized redfish that were floating around dead. That were obviously dead for a few days. But, overall, to be honest, it's been pretty okay until today. We had a tough day today, and I'm hoping this goes away in about another week or so on a few tides.
Now, generally speaking, Greg, will lower water temperatures break that red tide up and send it on its way?
Yeah, it should. Well, it's sending it on its way is all about Mother Nature, tides, and wind. But what lower temperature does is it definitely reduces the amount of bloom. So you might run into areas where it's trying to bloom or trying to maintain itself, but these colder weather conditions just don't allow it to get full speed, which is good. We got another front coming in a few days. We'll see how that affects things. We need a couple good flushes to get things going in the right direction. But the guys who did get out offshore, Rick, did very well this week. And it's kind of ironic because our gag grouper in our neck of the woods is closed now. And these guys can't get away from these things. They're catching fish 30, 34, 35 inches like it's crazy right now. Those fish have moved into the shallower waters, and they're just killing it. But you can't keep them. It's a nice picture. On the reverse side, the snapper fishing has been very good for those guys, along with a lot of other things like the red groupers and some of the suspects that they always do, like the porgies.
I see. Okay, well, there ain't nothing wrong with that. Your weather's held pretty steady the last few days, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. We've got a couple days coming up that it might get a little bit crazy, but after that, things should, pan out the way we'd like them to. Hopefully for us in the back base, we'll start seeing this stuff pan out as far as the red tide goes, and things will go away and be good again. I'm just hoping, Rick, that we get some good tides here in the future that can get this stuff flushed in, flushed out, flushed in, flushed out, and get this stuff moving south. I don't know what Steve said down south, but, it's definitely moving that way, and I'm sure that it's affecting them as well.
Yeah, he said he's seen a few patches of it for the first time in weeks. He saw some today, so apparently there has been a little bit of a shift, and we will absolutely send good thoughts your way and prayers your way that red tide does not set in your area anything like it did a few years ago, because we need you guys to keep fishing and keep bringing us great reports every week. What has been the bait of choice? Are you still catching live bait, or are your guys throwing lures now?
Well, we have thrown lures. We did throw some flies. The good part is up in the rivers and the creeks, that's where it's been at. You can definitely throw lures and flies in those areas. But for the most part, until I know I'm good, I'm not going to go out there on those beaches, catch these baits, because they're there, Rick. They're there. I see them. There's bait there. But the concern is catching them and then getting back to the dock and then getting in the marina and that stuff staying alive. So I don't want to hurt those things. I'll let them be. Most part, it's been shrimp. The shrimp are a lot more hardy. They can kind of deal with that. I do throw a copper pipe in my live well, which seems to help a little bit. It's an old wives' tale, I believe, but it does definitely work because I've seen some differences in the way these fish react. And until I know things are kind of on the up and up, I really am not going to go out there and go catch these pinfish and these whitebaits and these thread fins, because I've noticed, obviously on my boat, I draft very shallow. I can float 9-10 inches. So, if I catch these bait in 2, 3, 4 feet of water and they're fine, my pump's sucking from 8-9 inches, and that's where the water is kind of
toxic.
Iffy. So that's what's going on my live well. If I could put a little tube down, that got me down to 4 feet and suck water from there, that'd be good. But it'd be a really tough day for me getting in the back bay.
I understand. That's quite a tip. I've never heard that before. Put a copper pipe in your live well.
Yeah, I learned that from an old captain of mine, Rob Modi. He's been around forever.
I know the name.
Great job. He told me that, and I said, "Really? All right, I'll try it." And I did it, and I'm like, "Man, this does do something." I don't know what it is, Rick. I'm not a scientist. It you can tell me what it does, let me know.
Now, is that just under red tide conditions, or is that every day?
No, yes, sir. No, just on the red tide. When I think
okay.
it's around, I throw that in my live well and just let it be. I got a little 12-inch piece. I just throw it in there.
I was going to go get a piece of copper pipe real quick and see if my baits did better, but we don't have red tide up here. Cap, as always, I appreciate it so much, and please tell me we can talk with you next week.
You got it. All right, tight lines, Rick.
Thanks, Captain Greg. Greg Stamper from Snook Stamp Charters. Let's pull on up to the West Central area and see what Captain Markham's up to. Our thanks to Captain Greg Stamper for a great Southwest Florida report. Greg and all of our action spotters are brought to you each and every week by Yamaha. Reliability starts here. By Tournament Master Chum, the best chum on earth. By Nosara, Paradise Fishing, your dream vacation. And by Young Boats. You want the finest in flat, spay, and offshore hybrids? You need to check out youngboats.com. Let's pull over to the West Central area and check in with none other than the great Captain Ray Markham. Ray, how are you?
Oh, awesome. Hey, I love my Yamaha.
Yeah, I think we all love our Yamahas.
Great motors, very dependable.
I got to tell you,
yes, sir, go ahead.
I got to tell you a quick one. I was down in Costa Rica with one of the Yamaha execs that's a good friend of mine last year, and the operator of the charter service down there was all so proud. He said, yes, sir. He said, we run these motors 6,000 hours. He's got 14 200s on 7 different boats. They've each got twin 200s. And he says, we run them 6,000 hours, and then they're pre-sold to the Yamaha guy here in Costa Rica, and he resells them. And the Yamaha exec said, why 6,000 hours? He said, well, I don't want any problems with them. I don't want them to blow up or anything. He says, let them run 10. They don't care. I'm like, holy smokes. I'm not going to fish 10,000 more hours in my lifetime.
Well, I know I put at least that many hours on my trolling motors, which, I've had a few different kinds of trolling motors. My Minn Kota always gets me home. So, if I cruise out of where I used to live, it was maybe a block. I'd turn the motor on, the big motor, come out of the canal, shut it up, and then for the next 8 hours, I'd be going on my trolling motor and my battery. And I can't say enough good about the AGM batteries. I've been using Odyssey now for years, but they okay. Well, I love my Odyssey, but you know what? Every time I turn the motor on, I can run for hours. It gives me dependable coverage and time on the water with them without having to worry about a thing. I can go for 3 days without a recharge, but because I have an onboard charger, I go ahead and plug it in every time I come in. So it's all good.
Well,
they charge up real good stuff.
Well, let's talk fishing. Tell me how it's been this year.
Well, this year?
Yeah,
well,
we're only 3 days in. Tell me what you know.
I know. Well, I'm thinking, that was last week's news, I mean, gee. Let's see. So far this year, be honest with you, the majority of the catches I'm hearing have been about sheep's head. A lot of sheep's head getting caught. Most of the guys are either fishing live shrimp or fiddler crabs. Fiddler crabs being the top bait. They've been a little bit harder to get a hold of because if you're a guy that knows you can go out and find your own bait without having to pay for it, you might try and round them up on some beach somewhere, but they tend to only come out when there's a lot of sunshine. So we've had some overcast days with a little spit and rain for the last few days and a little cooler weather moving in. So they get a little hesitant to come out, but they will be out here real soon. I'm sure we've got some little bit warmer weather for this middle part of the week. So as we get towards the weekend, we'd be moving to another cold front. But I think if you can go get yourself some live shrimp, you probably do just about as well. But these things are just not hesitant to eat a fiddler crab at all. Just stick it down on the piling and you're done. So also catching a lot of trout. Guys that are fishing tandem rigs out on the beaches are actually catching some silver trout now. So, silver and speckled trout are doing really well. guys up to the north of us, up from Hernando down into Pasco, are catching, I would say, probably a little bit bigger trout than what we've got down here in Pinellas and Sarasota, but still we're seeing a lot of catches coming in of 18 to 22 inch trout. So they're decent fish. We still can't keep them down in my area here, but the guys up north of Pinellas, the Pasco Hernando line can keep them, and then way south, down south in Collier County, they can start keeping them beyond. I forget what the name of the place is now, but anyway, that's way down Lee County. So, or Collier, I'm sorry. But anyway, we're also catching some nice flounder. I say nice. They're legal this week.
Yeah.
You wait another couple of months and they probably won't be.
Yeah.
With the flounder sizes increasing to 14 inches. But they are catching a few flounder. Fishing around the passes, Big Sarasota Pass and Longboat Pass. They're both reporting some pompano down there. If you come up towards Pinellas and South Pinellas, the Paso Grill Channel has shown a few pompano anglers catching some nice fish there, and a few pompano over at it'll come to me, John's Pass.
Mm-hmm.
So Doc's goofy jigs, and if you've got just a plain straight grub style tail, about 2.5 inches long on a 1/4 ounce jig head, you probably do very well with it.
Good.
I like fishing the DOA Terrorize for them, and I use their heavier head, the 3/8 ounce, and bounce that off the bottom. And I've done extremely well with the root beer color, root beer with gold glitter. Done real well with pompano for that. So I love those pompano. For the guys that like to move around a lot, you probably really be interested in catching some Spanish mackerel. We've had Spanish mackerel in just about all the passes. Anna Maria, the piers down there, the Skyway Fishing Pier, the piers out there at Fort DeSoto, they're all catching them. They're catching them up and down on the beaches too. So Spanish mackerel seem to be following the schools of glass minnows that we've had popping up on the nice days. The baits will just come up and look like little rain minnows up on the surface. And whenever I see anything like that, I'm going to stop in a heartbeat, because I'll catch one of two things. It's either going to be trout or it's going to be ladyfish and Spanish mackerel. And we've had catches, all of those fishing around the glass minnows. So that's all been good. The guys fishing offshore, hogfish has been pretty much the name of the game here for, the last few weeks. And they're catching them primarily between 30 and 50 feet of water, so you don't have to go far for them. And I just have to say this. The guys over at Hubbard's Marina, I don't know, they must be rubbing their magic, shamrock or the rabbit's foot, lucky rabbit foot or something, because the last 39-hour trip of the year, which of course is last week, they absolutely loaded the boat.
Mm-hmm.
They had gag grouper, they had red grouper, lane snapper, mangrove snapper, blackfin tuna, kingfish, scamp, strawberry grouper, hogfish.
Goodness.
And on, and kingfish, and they did not put a single red snapper or amberjack in the boat and still have loaded fish boxes.
No amberjack? I'll be darned. Yeah.
Nope. They said in 39 hours they only made 10 stops.
Wow.
10 stops. They spent hours at each stop because the fishing was that good. It was just boom, boom, boom. And these guys came in, and if you could have seen the looks on some of these guys' faces, they were just whooped puppies. They had awesome trip, and they say this was probably one of the 5 best trips of the entire year. So they're out there, they're biting, and it's just a matter of finding that window to get out there to do it. So
yeah, they can on those big Florida fish finders. They can go a lot further in a lot rougher weather than what a normal boat can. Those monster cats that those guys run are very impressive machines. There's no doubt. I went there one time and I'm all nervous about a 15-knot wind that's blowing, and I'm like, oh man, I'm gonna hate this. Yep. And shoot, you didn't even know it was blowing. It was
true. I mean, I've been on one of the 39-hour trips, and I'll tell you, I mean, the boats are built for comfort. They really are. I mean, they got air conditioning for the summertime. They got galleys on board. Anytime you get hungry, you can go down. You can ask somebody, hey, can cook me up a hamburger, or cheeseburger, or something, and they have dinner every night, every morning. They got a big spread for breakfast, and if you're hungry at lunch, they got sandwiches and all kinds of stuff, beer, whatever else you want. I would definitely not take a beer out on my boat. I have enough trouble just standing up without being drinking beer. So,
I'm with you. Ray, thank you so much for a great report. Please tell me we can talk with you again next week.
Now, if the good Lord willing and the creek don't rise, I'll see you next week.
I look forward to it, Cap, as always. Captain Ray Markham with a good report from West Central Florida for us. Let's start up into the Panhandle. It's time to hit the Big Bend and talk with Captain William Toney.
Doing good, Rick. We're having a great New Year's week coming up here. A little bit on the chilly side,
yes,
but
it
brings in new species. The wintertime stuff, I always tell people, slow down a little. But today we had really light winds, and we caught some big trout in very shallow water on the western and north-facing shorelines with that sun beating down about midday. Didn't have a lot of water, but what was really cool about catching our trout today is that, normally here, throwing back trout, nobody likes it, but we had to release over 4 trout that were over the 20-inch slot. So we had our 1 over 19 in the boat that was 20 inches, and we let go about 4 fish that were between 20 and 24 inches.
Wow.
Which is kind of cool. And it's good to see them. Yep.
That is way cool. And isn't it, after you and I, we've both spent our lives doing it, isn't it fun to let those big fish go?
Absolutely. There's no, the pressure is off of me as a guide to, negotiate about if that fish should go in the box or not. It's a law now. And, I just think it's going to get better and better. And generally, if you're on the Big Bend, starting, more near the end of January through the end of March is when we get our big female trout laid up very shallow. And, I love catching big redfish, but I tell you what, a big Nature Coast trout, a Big Bend area trout that's about 24 inches will give you a fight like you haven't ever seen in about 1.5 feet of water. Mm-hmm. And they're fun to catch, beautiful fish. And, it's kind of our bread and butter here, and it's really a good thing to see that we got a good, stable trout fishery that's going to be around for a long time here on the Big Bend.
That's fantastic. What's biting besides trout?
Well, this month is when you want to head out to those shallow rocks. So if you were in the grouper and shallow water grouper, that season's closed now. But those same rocks and same structure that you were getting the grouper on are going to be taken over by sheep's head, especially coming up here around the full moon in January. Now, this past full moon we had right here around New Year's, I had a really good afternoon. We were on one rock, and I had 4 anglers. We kept 15 sheep's head that were between 2 to about 7 pounds.
Good fish.
Real nice fish. And the bite was really fast and fantastic. The water's a little bit dirty out there, but the best bait that I like to use is a chartreuse jig head, either 1/8 or 1/4 ounce. And what I do is I use a shrimp about 3 inches long, pinch that tail off, thread it on the hook backwards. And the structure, if you can see it, you want to throw right next to that rock and just let it lay. And generally the sheep's head are using a structure like that. It'll be sandy around it where they have fanned it out. And, sometimes it's clear enough. You can just really ride over the rock and see, I see 2 here, hit another rock. Oh my gosh, there's like 50 and find a more productive spot. But right now with the clarity of the water and everything, you're going to have to kind of go to those bigger, high-profile rocks and put that bait right up against it.
That is very interesting. Now, do you like live shrimp better than fiddler crabs?
I do, and the only reason, Rick, I like live shrimp because they're easier to get.
Okay, good point.
Now, fiddler crabs. Now you get up a little bit north of where we are here in Homosassa, you start hitting Cedar Key, English, Yankeetown up there. They get a lot of fiddler crabs, and some of the different tackle shops actually carry them. Down toward the south end here on the Big Bend, not as many. Now I have gone out and I have dug some and got some myself, and they work really well. It's just the convenience of getting them. So, the anglers up there more towards Cedar Key, Steenahatchee, out of Waukesassa, they have a little bit more mud flats where they're easier to get out there and kind of corral them and catch them, or the tackle shops actually carry them. So, they may actually be cheaper in live shrimp, but work just as good or better.
I tell you, they are by far the preferred bait over here because we have so many bait stealers that will move in on a live shrimp and peck it to shreds before sheep's head can ever get to it. That's interesting. I don't know why your bait shops don't carry them, except this winter it's been so cold that no bait shops have been carrying them. So it's hard to get them you can't get them up out of their holes. They're kind of like me. They like to pull their covers over their head this time of year.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't blame them for being down there, especially with the temperatures. But, that's our big bite going on, especially for here in January. But, we also got some good snook fishing in our spring-fed rivers. I always start about midways out of each river and then head back east. The closer you get out toward the Gulf, of course, we had water temperatures down to 56 last week. Today it was 61 out there, but when you get halfway up the river, you're hitting 66, 67. Then when you get toward the springs, you're in that 70-degree mark. So the fish will move in and out depending on, the air temperature. And if you get a couple days of real warm weather, you can have some great snook that just kind of fall out of the springs and the blue water area down the river. And you got dock lights, you got docks, you got blowdowns and trees. So it's just pretty fun fishing. It's a catch and release thing, but you know what? I will say last week I was very, very astounded that we did catch a snook in 56-degree water at Hell's Gate in Homosassa. So, normally they're supposed to be belly up and dead at that temperature, but this fish ate. It wasn't just nibbling. It struck pretty hard. So, the fishery for snook here is doing very well. And that's just something, if you want to bend the rod and go, not burn any gas, drop the boat in the river and use a trolling motor, that's all you got to do, and you can get in some fun snook action.
That's fantastic. I would enjoy that thoroughly. Captain William, thank you so much for a great report. Please tell me we can talk with you again next week.
I'll be here next week.
All right. Well, sit back in the rocking chair there and keep them straight at the stop sign, and we'll talk with you next week. He's catching snook. Man, it's mighty cool to be catching snook. Let's pull on up to further into the Panhandle and check with our buddy, Captain Kevin Lanier. Captain Kevin, how we doing?
Hey, Captain Rick, we're doing good. How about yourself?
Wonderful. It's a new year. I'm in great shape. I'm looking good.
Well, that's a good way to start, for sure.
Well, you hear about kids having late growth spurts. I'm thinking this is my year.
Oh, I got you. Well, we can always look positive to the fact that we don't look any worse than we did last year.
Well, I went to my vet the other day with my big lab, who is the love of my life, and he said, Rick, he's gained 12 pounds in the last 14 months. I said, well, you know what? So between Elvis and I, we are both walking a minimum of 10,000 steps a day now. We're going to get in shape. We're going to grow taller, and we're going to look thinner and meaner than we did last year.
Well, good for you and Elvis. I'm glad to hear that.
I like Elvis's chances better than mine. Tell me.
Oh, I'd take that bet too.
Tell me what's going on fish-wise out there.
Yeah, well, we've gotten a little bit of weather. We had a little bit of spurt of nice weather, too. Some of the guys were able to get out, even on short trips. We've still been enjoying the holidays with family, so we've been fishing vicariously through other people this past week. But sheep's head are still good there around the area. We're picking up a few few trout that came in. The Vermilion snapper offshore is still, if you can get out there, you'll get them. Catch and release red snapper all day long. Our grouper season closed on the 31st, so now we have to wait till the other side of the Cape opens back up in April. So we're looking forward to that. But there's still plenty of fishing to do. I mean, if you guys like Vermilion snapper, you like white snapper, porgies, that kind of stuff, there's plenty of fish to catch around here in the Maysville Beach, Apalachicola, all this area around here.
Outstanding. Well, that doesn't sound bad at all. I tell you, can you pretty well count on a limit of vermilions right now? Is your vermilion fishing good?
Yes, vermilion fishing's good. If you know some of the spots to go to, and if there's a lot of current, sometimes it'll slow them down. Or of course, there's the ever-present dolphin packs that show up. But if you can get around those two things, you can get a limit of vermilions without any trouble at all.
Now, when you talk about dolphin packs, let's not confuse people. You're talking about the mammal dolphins that come and pull them off your hooks, right?
I'm talking about the ones that eat my fish.
Yeah. I knew that's what you meant. Yeah. The
porpoise.
That's a learned activity, and it's spreading. And I'm convinced of that, Kevin. Down in Stuart, Florida, for the last 2 years, every small bonita you hook, of all the crazy things, when we're sail fishing, if a bonita grabs one of my live baits and feels that hook, you will immediately see them start greyhounding towards you. And they can be 400 yards away. And I don't know if that bonita makes a noise. I don't know what he does, but you let him get on the end of that line, and here they come. And they will strip that bonita down to where you have the head and the gills, and that's it. Everything else is gone. They've swallowed it.
It doesn't surprise me. I mean, we have the same issues here. You get on the reef, you drop down, you reel up a couple of fish, and here they come.
Mm-hmm.
It's like somebody let the dogs out. That's what it looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that, it never used to be that way when we were kids. Do you remember them doing that when we were kids?
No, I don't remember them doing that. I mean, it was like, that was, I never even heard of that. So
the first I
don't know, just like everything else.
The first I ever encountered it was on the Johns Pass, the 36-hour trips that they make. And I encountered it there, and I thought that's the strangest thing. And it's making its way around. It's nuts. But it's now happening off Stuart, and I have no doubt that it'll work its way up to Jacksonville in no time.
Oh, there's no doubt in my mind. What happens around here is the dolphin hang outside of St. Andrews Pass, Panama City, and they follow the large party boats out.
Sure they do. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And pretty soon, one of them will take a vacation. They get vacations, and they will swim over to Jacksonville to visit Aunt Martha, and they will say, Aunt Martha, let me tell you what we've learned. You got to see this, all right? And then it'll be here. You can just count on it.
Oh, I know. You're right. I mean, it's just like everything else. It's just things get out of hand, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Captain Kevin, we appreciate it. Life is still good, even if we have to contend with the Dolphins, and I look forward to talking with you next week.
All right, Captain Rick, we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks
Happy
so
New
much.
Year.
Captain Kevin Lanier bringing us a report from the Northwest region. Can't leave Florida till we go out through the Panhandle. Let's check in with Captain Tyler Massey.
You know what Yamaha Outboards love? The genuine formula and consistency of Yamalube marine engine oils. Outboards are subjected to punishing conditions like high loads, salt, and humidity, a mix that automotive oils can't handle. Yamalube full synthetic and marine performance formulas are certified to protect against friction and corrosion for reliable performance every time. Find Yamalube marine oils at your nearest Yamaha Outboard dealer. Locate them at yamahaoutboards.com/dealers. Yamaha, reliability starts here.
Hey, Rod, Dodge. You know, being consistent is a mark of a quality product. If you've been Florida's #1 chum for over 10 years, there's got to be a reason.
For 10 years, Tournament Master Chum has lived up to its name. That's why more tournament pros insist on Tournament Master than any other chum. It's the only chum with menhaden milk mixed right in. That means it gets the scent out faster and deeper than any other brand of chum. It comes in a grind size for every species from kingfish to catching bait. Your fishing time is way too precious to use second-rate chum. Bring the action to you by insisting on Tournament Master Chum. It's worth every penny.
When you're ready for the finest in custom-made flat spay or inshore-offshore hybrids, you are ready to meet the Young family in Inglis, Florida. For over 21 years, the Young family has built custom boats one at a time for every type of fishing. Nothing can sneak up on a flat quite like the Gulf Shore flats boats, and I've never fished a better hybrid than the Young 24s and 27s. Rob Young is a naval architect who takes tremendous pride in each and every build for each and every customer that wants their boat custom built exactly the way they want it. Is it time for you to move up? Are you ready to own the finest boat built? Then you need to visit the Young Boat facility in Inglis, Florida, or check them out online at youngboats.com. Our thanks to Captain Kevin Lanier for a great Northwest Florida report. Can't leave Florida without going out the Panhandle, and right there in Pensacola is where Captain Tyler Massey's hanging out. Tyler, how are you?
I'm doing good, Rick. How are you guys?
Doing outstanding, my boy. Tell me about fishing in the Pensacola region.
So it's still been pretty consistent, you know, and not much has changed from our last couple of weeks. You know, inshore, most of the guys are focusing on sheephead, black drum, redfish, and speckled trout. You know, fishing the bridges have been pretty productive. You catching, you know, everything but the speckled trout around our bridges, just all the big bridges in the bay, catching sheephead and black drum on the pilings and redfish on the pilings and in between the pilings also. So, you know, just a big variety and just fishing live shrimp or small fiddler crab and looking pretty good. You know, it's not a red hot bite, but you can go out there and definitely catch a few.
Captain Tyler, I was just talking with William Toney a few minutes ago, and in his area there in the Big Bend, they don't sell fiddler crabs, and they sheepshead fish all the time with live shrimp. Now, in Northeast Florida, that's been difficult for me. We have so many little fish, so many tiny sea bass, so many little whiting and such that'll tear up your live shrimp. Are you guys pretty consistently able to get fiddlers?
Yeah, we are. And what's actually funny is they come from the Big Bend, actually. So I don't know why they can't get them over there. They come from Rising Sun Bait, who supplies shrimp to all of part of West Florida.
I see.
But yeah, so it's not super consistent this time of year, but as it warms up, it will be. And but you know, the tackle stores are getting a few thousand a weekend. You know, they're going pretty quick. But there's also some places we can catch them ourselves up here. It's not, you can go catch a few dozen, you know, enough to go fishing with.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just around marshy areas, right on the bank. On low tide, you can see it. You know, they'll be up there in the grass and stuff. You can go pick a few dozen up off the grass and stuff. But yeah, like same here with us. You know, the shrimp, the sheephead will eat shrimp. So like you said, we got pinfish and pigfish and a whole lot of small stuff that just, you know, eat them off your hooks a lot of times. So, you know, fishing the bridges this time of year, crabs are working a little better. When we catch a sheephead in our pass in the spring, shrimp work just as good as anything else. So, you know, it's people also use some like oysters and you know, ghost shrimp and all kinds of other stuff. I just keep it pretty simple. We either fiddler crabs or live shrimp.
Uh-huh. Now, are you guys able to scrape pilings over there on these bridges? Can you scrape the barnacles off the pilings to chum them?
Yep. Little flathead shovel or a garden spade to, you know, knock the barnacles off. It works pretty good. If there's not too much tide, you know, if there's a whole lot of tide, you're knocking the barnacles off and they're going, you know, at a range where the sheephead are going to be. But yeah, that definitely get them fired up on a you know, nice slow moving tide or a slack tide.
Gotcha. That's outstanding. Offshore is pretty well shut down this time of year, isn't it?
Yeah, not much going on out there. You know, a few vermilion snappers. Some people are trying to catch. Everything else is just about closed for us. But you know, it's a good time to go out and catch and release fish.
Mm-hmm.
You know, amberjacks are biting really well on the wrecks. Snappers are, you know, they bite great this time of year. So, you know, some people don't care about keeping stuff. it's fun to go out there and catch some amberjacks on some vertical jigs, or or pull on some red snapper for a little bit. So there's definitely fish out there, just not much to bring home with you.
Sure it is. It is fun. We go for the fishing. We don't necessarily go for the seafood. If we did, we'd realize we're paying way too much.
It's easy to go to the store for sure.
Cap, I appreciate it so much. Thanks for a great report, and we'll talk with you next week if that's okay.
All right.
You got it.
We'll be here. We'll see you.
Captain Tyler Massey finishes up our report for a trip around Florida, and it's been a pretty good one. Up in the Northeast, the cold water's starting to get to the boys. It's a bit of a struggle. Trout aren't biting as well as they have been. Things have slowed down a little bit. Sheep's head have been tough because we can't get any fiddlers. Now, you go down south, I tell you what, Captain John Earhart is fired up. The Pelican Sailfish Tournament goes on this week, and the sail fishing is at its prime. We've had an unusual number of cold fronts, and they've pushed those sails down to Stewart, even on down to Miami, where Captain Alan Sherman says that Jimbo Thomas, the boys on the Thomas Flyer, and I know Captain Ray Rocher on the Miss Brit are having excellent sailfish days. You move over into the southwest area, and Captain Steve Dahl says things are still pretty good, but the red tide has intensified a little bit. He's seen a few floating redfish that he wasn't seeing a week ago. That's concerning. We got the same word from Greg Stamper. He's seen more red tide. Says the shrimp can survive it. His advice, I've never heard this before, this is a good one. His advice is to put a piece of copper in your live well if you're concerned about red tide conditions on the West Coast. It seems to help your bait live longer. Up into the West Central, no, Ray Markham has seen none of the red tide. He's been very happy with the trout, Spanish mackerel, and the sheep's head fishing. Sheep's head have ruled the day as you get up into the Big Bend area. William Toney is catching a bunch of them on live shrimp. That seems to be the best of it headed out west, has been redfish and sheep's head, as the trip offshore has been just too tough, just too cold, and not many fish you can keep when you get there now that grouper season's closed. So that's kind of how it's been around the week to start off the new year. I think 2021 is going to be one of our better fishing years because so many fish are under good management plans now. Hey, listen, we hope you enjoyed tonight's podcast. If you got a question for any of the podcasters, send it to rick@floridasportsman.com or post it on our Facebook page, and I'll be glad to get it to the podcaster in the area that you're asking about. This week and every week, our podcast has been brought to you by Yamaha. Reliability starts here. By Tournament Master Chum, the best chum on earth. By Nosara, Paradise Fishing, your dream vacation, and by Young Boats. You want the finest in flats, bay, and offshore hybrids? You need to check out youngboats.com. We sure hope you've enjoyed tonight's podcast. If you have, please let us know about it. Go on wherever you get your podcast and rate us and leave us a comment. Let us know how we can make it better. You got a question for someone around the state? Just let us know. We'll ask them the question during the podcast and get your answer to you right away. Until next week, this is Captain Rick Riles from Florida Sportsman for the Florida Sportsman Action Spotter Podcast, and we will see you on the rip.